It's a great place. And again, enjoyed having Mrs. Beikirch with her husband this week. Let's give her a good hand again for coming. They came a long way to be with us, and so enjoyed having her. I did not take the time to do this morning, but I want to do it right now. We ran out of these little booklets, and I'm going to have him ship some in. Some of you brought guests today, and they did not get one. We'll have some shipped in, and you can give them to your guests because a lot of folks were asking for it. I think the last year when we had him, I took a moment to read this, but I didn't ask him permission. I'm going to read it anyway because he's probably going somewhere else with his message. But it's not often that you're around somebody that has a Medal of Honor, and we understand. We heard him preach today. We understand how he feels about that, and we're grateful for that. But I want our young people to understand about the Medal of Honor. Approximately how many Medal of Honor recipients are alive right now? 71. That's less than what I thought. And the World War II guys are really falling quickly, aren't they? Three left. 3 World War II. One of them's Woody Williams, right? How old is Woody? And man, that guy travels everywhere. He's from West Virginia as well. And we're grateful for these. But the President of the United States bestows this honor on people of valor. I think you received yours October 15th, 1973. I believe I'm right on that. And for valor shown on the battlefield. They're given a citation. I want to take just a moment. That citation is inside this brochure. But I'll read this because I want our young people to know. I want them to understand that there are a lot of brave soldiers. But sometimes even the comrades note certain men of distinguish. And Brother Beikirch is one of 73, whatever he said just a moment, 74. The citation reads this from the President of the United States: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Sergeant Beikirch, Medical Aidman, Detachment B-24, Company B, distinguished himself in the defense of Camp Dak Siang. The Allied defenders suffered a number of casualties as a result of an intense, devastating attack launched by the enemy from well-concealed positions surrounding the camp. Sergeant Beikirch, with complete disregard for his personal safety, moved unhesitatingly through the withering enemy fire to his fallen comrades, applied first aid to their wounds, and assisted them to the medical aid station. When informed that a seriously injured American officer was lying in an exposed position, Sergeant Beikirch ran immediately through the hail of fire. Although he was wounded seriously by fragments from an exploding enemy mortar shell, Sergeant Beikirch carried the officer to a medical aid station, ignoring his own serious injuries. Sergeant Beikirch left the relative safety of the medical bunker to search for and evacuate other men who had been injured. He was again wounded as he dragged a critically injured Vietnamese soldier to the medical bunker while simultaneously applying mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to sustain his life. Sergeant Beikirch again refused treatment and continued his search for other casualties until he collapsed. Only then did he permit himself to be treated. Sergeant Beikirch's complete devotion to the welfare of his comrades at the risk of his own life are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit on him, his unit, and the U.S. Army. With great honor, we have Brother Beikirch with us, of course, to enjoy this Patriotic Sunday, because we do not want this particular event that America has always held in high esteem to vanquish. A number of our dignitaries told me today that very, very few churches now celebrate this in the way that we do, and it used to be that many churches did so. And I'm grateful that we continue to hold it here as a tradition to remember the American military and men like Brother Beikirch. There's much, much more to that story. That's just what was written in the citation. As I get to know him more and more each year, I find out more about him. And he was working in actually where his mission was in an establishment of other Vietnamese that was fighting for us, and I think they were training some of them, and he lost some very, very dear friends, very close friends in that firefight. I just found out today, I asked him, we were talking about how he was medevaced out, and I said, were they able to land because they were under heavy fire? Now, you understand, the helicopter pilots under those times, they drew a fire from the ground quite often, he said, preacher, he said, when they medevac me out, he said, the chopper was only on the ground about 10 seconds, just enough to get me in, and off we went. If you can just imagine all that. And I'm grateful and thankful for the American soldier. I want them to be the most well-equipped. I want them to have the most firepower of any army in the world. And I'm grateful God brought him home, and we're the beneficiaries of his story. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I think we're going to get it in a book sometime real soon. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I think the plans are on the table. Let's give a good welcome again. Medal honor recipient, Gary Beikirch. God bless you. Thank you for coming to our church.
Thank you. Thank you. As I was listening to that citation, it may come as a surprise, maybe not to some of you that have a military background, but even in a citation of a Medal of Honor, the military makes mistakes because it's not really totally accurate as to how the citation was written. It's obvious that whoever wrote that citation was not there to observe all the action, because there's one portion as you get down through the citation about the second or third paragraph that it said that I moved unhesitatingly through all that fire. Obviously that guy wasn't there because there was a lot of hesitation. But I got to try to fill in some time because every time I hear the citation, I don't hear the words. I still hear explosions. I still hear gunshots. I still hear a lot of screams. I still hear a lot of things that took me a lot of years to get over, and still not over, as anyone who's gone through trauma understands. You never really get over it. As I said this morning, you think that maybe if I could just forget it, I'd get better. But I've learned that forgetting is not getting better, and I shared that this morning. I want to thank you on behalf of my wife for the welcome, the warm Tennessee love and hospitality that we've received. This is my second time back, and I loved it so much the first time that I brought my wife with me this time, because it feels like home. And your welcome has this time made it feel more like home. Actually, any place that invites me back a second time is like home for me. I feel pretty good when I get invited back. That's a good sign. But since this does feel like home, and since this is a Sunday evening service, I thought about something to share. And I want to follow up a little bit with some of the things that I was saying this morning. I want to share something that I've learned about living. It's a personal thing, and I haven't shared it too often, but I'd like to share it with you. I mentioned this morning that the story about my cave, and how that after the war, I had difficulty, and I went into the cave to try to survive. And when people find out that I had lived in a cave, it's like they don't want to know anything about the Medal of Honor or anything to do with the Medal of Honor. They all want to know about the cave. You know, what was the cave like? How did you live? You know, why did you go into the cave? Well, the reason I went into the cave is I said that war is something that's it's a terrible thing. I referred to it as war is like a body slam that life can give you. It's something that challenges who you are. It challenges what you feel about yourself. It challenges what you value. It challenges how you see yourself. And the reason that I went into the cave was that because I didn't understand what had happened to me. And I sought the cave because I was trying to sort out all that war had done to me. I went into the cave to try to heal. And I stayed in that cave for 2 years, trying to heal. I worked 33 years as a middle school counselor, and when I used to tell some of my story to my students, one of the students said, well, Mr. B, you lived in a cave. Whatever brought you out of the cave? And so what I want to do tonight is I want to share with you a little bit about why I came out of the cave. But first of all, I want to share with you what made me stay in the cave. And what made me stay in the cave was fear. You see, war had changed me, just as war changes many who are involved with the war. I came back with a different picture of who I was. I came back not valuing the things that I used to value. I came back, in many respects, not liking who I was anymore. And my fear was that if other people knew how I felt, if other people would see me like I saw myself, then they would reject me. And I didn't want to be rejected. I rejected myself. I went into that cave because I couldn't forgive myself for some of the things that happened in Vietnam. So fear of who I was kept me in the cave. I'd become a Christian before I went to the cave, and I knew that God had forgiven me. But there's a strange thing about forgiveness and how it works in a person's life. I knew God had forgiven me, but I sure had a real hard time forgiving myself. Living with myself was difficult. And if I couldn't live with myself, I couldn't live with others. And so I stayed in that cave. The other thing that kept me in that cave was the fear of what my feelings might cause me to do. There was a rage that I felt, a rage towards myself, a rage towards other people, a rage towards those people that, for many of us that came back from Vietnam, did not give us the welcome home that we thought that we needed. And so there was a rage, and I feared that. So I stayed in the cave because of fear. So then what brought me out of the cave? What brought me out of the cave was love. As I shared this morning, I met my wife in the cave. Not that she was hiking in the woods, but it was her love that helped bring me out of the cave. What also brought me out of the cave was the love that I had experienced from God. I spent 2 years in that cave studying, reading his Bible, trying to put my life back together, trying to understand about how he could forgive me so that I might be able to be better able to forgive myself. Because I wanted to try to learn how to live with other people. And he taught me that I needed to love in order to live with other people, but I didn't know how to love. Well, then he showed me how to love. And he said, okay, Gary, I want you to come out of the cave because I've given you a message about love. I've given you a message about life. I've given you a message about how to live and what really living is like, how to really live. We had a saying that was that to really live you must almost die. To those that fight for it, life has a meaning the protected will never know. For 2 years I fought in that cave, trying to learn about how to really live. I learned that in order to really live, I needed to die to myself. I needed to die to those parts of myself that wouldn't allow me to forgive myself. I needed to die to those parts of myself that kept that anger and rage towards other people. In order to really live, I needed to love. I said, okay, God, I'll come out of the cave. And he said, I want you to come out of the cave and I want you to share my story. I want you to love people like I've loved you, Gary. And in John 13, he gave a perfect example to me of how I was supposed to love people. John 13 is where Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And he said, if I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. I said, okay, Lord, you want me to love. You want me to wash feet. But how can I wash the feet of those that I hate? How can I wash the feet of those who spit on me? How can I wash the feet of those that called me a baby killer? How can I wash my own feet, God, when I can't even forgive myself? How can I wash the feet of the enemy that killed so many friends? I know you want me to share your story. I know you want me to love. But how can I love? How can I wash others' feet? There was a man named Stiller who had a quote that gave me the key to washing other people's feet. He said that forgiveness is the well from which we draw the water to wash others' feet. You want to wash somebody's feet, Gary? You want to be able to love? Go to the well of forgiveness. It's there that you can draw the water so that you can wash another's foot. Go to that well of water, Gary, that well of forgiveness. Forgive those who spit on you. Forgive those who hated you. Forgive those who you fought against. And you'll be able to wash their feet like I want you to. You'll be able to love them like I want you to. Forgiveness was the well that I had to go to in order to draw water so I could wash another's foot. I want to share a story with you about how I learned about that forgiveness. And it's a pretty personal story. You see, because it involves my father. And the story begins in a hospital bed. I was at Valley Forge after I'd been wounded. I spent 10 months in the hospital. And I was there one day lying in the hospital bed. And all of a sudden I saw, coming down the hall, a man walking towards me. I immediately knew it was my father. You might say, well, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Well, not really, you see, because I never knew my father. My parents were divorced when I was 4, and I only have a few memories of who my father was in my life. I never saw him again until that day when he walked in that hospital bed. The memories that I have of my dad is maybe playing catch with him because he played professional baseball, and him teaching me how to throw a curve. I remember sitting with him on a Saturday morning watching Flash Gordon. I remember him taking me to a bar and me playing on the swirling seats while he would go off with other women. Very vivid memories of my father, but none that I wanted to cherish as I was growing up. But that's all that I remembered. But my dad came walking in that hospital. He walked up to me, and at the time I don't really remember feeling any overwhelming emotion, because during those years that I didn't have the father, it had come to me that he didn't exist. There was no father in my life. So how can you have any feelings for something that doesn't exist? But all of a sudden, he came walking towards me. He walked up to me, and though he had not been a part of my life, he told me that he had been keeping track of me, that he was keeping track through his brother, my uncle, who I never knew, and that he had heard, the first report was that I had been killed in Vietnam, and he was glad to hear that I was not killed. He didn't stay too long. He left the card by my bed and just said, I wanted you to know that though I have not been a part of your life, I've never stopped loving you. I've never stopped thinking about you. And he said, I've never stopped praying for you. And he left. But before he left, he said, if you can ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'd love to have you come down to Florida and meet me and talk with me. And that's when he left. At the time, I was still trying to figure out my new relationship with my Heavenly Father, and now all of a sudden, here I am trying to figure out this relationship with my earthly father. It was kind of confusing. But after I had healed and after I got out of the Army, after I left the cave, I said, maybe what I need to do is to go and try to find out what this relationship is with my father. Find out who he is. Find out if there's anything there that we can have a relationship about. I wanted to try to sort out this father thing. So I hitchhiked down to Florida. And I remember as I was going down, I didn't really have any anger. There was no hate. There was mostly just kind of confusion as I was trying to sort out what must he have been feeling all those years. But there was no real hate. I had found out that he had become the sheriff of St. Johns County in Florida. I found out that he had married a wonderful Christian lady who led him to the Lord. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The biggest surprise came is that when I went and came into their home, he took me out into the lanai. And in the middle of the lanai was a chest. And in that chest, he said, I have something in here for you. I want to leave you here. I want you to spend some time reading the things that are in this chest. And then we can talk. But he said, I want you to understand that I always loved you. And the hardest thing for me to do was to leave you. And he said, here's why I did. He said, because I was a terrible husband. I wasn't that good of a father. And I didn't want to mess up your life. I knew that you had good, close family with uncles and cousins and aunts who would take care of you. And that if I stayed and tried to be a part of your life, that it would just make things chaotic for you. So I left you, Gary. But I never stopped loving you. And I want you to just read in this chest things that I put there for you. And he left. I opened up the chest, and I was surprised because it was filled with cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards. I opened them up, and there were little notes on the cards that were written from him. There were newspaper articles that his brother had cut out and sent down to him about me for different sports things that happened in the community. There were little Post-it notes on these little notes, and he said, today I went out fishing. I thought about you and how I can't wait to maybe someday take you out fishing. Here are some things I want to teach you about life. Here's some advice that I want to give you. He wrote these things never even knowing if he'd ever get a chance for me to read them. But it didn't matter to him. Something made him do it and put it in that chest. I sat through that chest and I read through that for hours and hours. And something happened as I read those things. You might think, boy, weren't you really angry? No. Rather than feeling angry, as I read my father's heart, I felt love. I felt his love for me. Rather than being consumed by any kind of hate that I might have had for him, all of a sudden, it was replaced with a sense of joy. Here was this man that was a part of me, who loved me, and who was thinking about me. Here is evidence of the days that his moments were spent in thoughts about me and who I was. I didn't really have any more burning questions anymore. You might think, boy, there's got to be a lot of questions you wanted to ask him. No, I didn't have any questions. As I read those thoughts of my father, those questions were replaced by a love. Because I had experienced something that I never knew before. I had experienced the love of an earthly father. And that love erased any kind of questions that I could have had. He came back after that. We talked. I stayed down there for a few days. We talked. We listened to one another. We prayed with each other. And forgiveness flowed between us as we washed each other's feet. For the next 20 years, we had a beautiful and wonderful father-son relationship. Was it the best father relationship? No, but it was mine. It's what I had. He did the best that he could. Was it like any others? No, it's probably very unique. But like I said, it was mine, and I was blessed to have it. And I learned over the years some things about that whole experience. I've not tried to make excuses for some of the bad decisions I made, and maybe if I would have had a father, I might have not made those stupid decisions. I'm not making any kind of excuses. When I share the story, I'm not looking for any kind of sympathy either, because I was blessed by that relationship. There's a real blessing that comes from the love of a father. And I experienced that. And through that, and my thinking about that over the years, the lessons that I have learned about forgiveness have helped me to be a better father, have helped me to be a better grandfather. The lessons that I've learned about forgiveness have helped me in my relationships. It's helped me be able to live with myself. It's helped me be able to live with others. Because it's tough living outside of a cave. Because life is hard. And people are sinners. But I learned that in order to live, and in order to love, we need to forgive. That forgiveness is that well that we go to draw the water, to wash another's feet. So I want to close by just giving you 3 takeaways that I learned from that whole experience. 3 things that I've learned about forgiveness and about how forgiveness can work and help a relationship. The first one, in your relationships with people, you're not going to always understand the choices they make. I could have judged my father and the choices that he made. I could have said, how could you leave me? How could you say that you love me when you never even wrote, never even made a phone call? I could have said that. I could have said, what was he thinking? If he really loved me, he would have done this. I don't understand. Well, I've learned that in order to love, you don't need to understand. Jesus didn't say, before you love someone else, before you wash their feet, I want you to talk with them. I want you to try to see where they're coming from. I want you to be able to understand them and why they did what they did. Did he say that? No. I don't understand why my dad did what he did. But I do understand and do know that God said love him. And that in order to love him, I need to forgive. There are some people in people that I love, my family. I don't always understand the choices they make, and it hurts some of the times. I don't even understand some of the choices that I make sometimes. Understanding is not a prerequisite to loving someone. You see, because a relationship with another person, as God wants, is not built on who's right or wrong. A relationship that Christ wants us to build a relationship on is built on something stronger and more truer than who is right and who is wrong. A marriage relationship, it's not about who's right or wrong, because we're both wrong, because Jesus was right. We're sinners and we need to be forgiven. That's what's right. What's wrong is that we're sinners. Understanding is not a prerequisite to loving. Forgiveness is. At this point in my life, my wife and I have this conversation quite often as we look at people who we know and the things that happen to us, disappointments, the hurts, and we kind of just shake our heads sometimes. We say, I don't understand. Yeah, at this point in my life, I don't even try to understand people anymore. The politics in Sacramento, the politics in Albany, New York, the politics in Washington, do I understand it? No, I don't understand it. But I love them and I pray for them. I forgive them. At this point in my life, understanding is not something that I seek in my walk with God. I don't say, God, help me understand why this person is doing that. I pray, God, help me to love this person. Give me the forgiveness so that I can show them your love. Give me the forgiveness so that I am able to wash their feet, regardless of what they've done to me. Takeaway number one about living with others: you do not always understand the choices that people make, but you don't have to love them. The second takeaway that I've learned from my experience with my father that's helped me in my relationships with others is that it's never too late to restore a relationship. Never too late. It's never too late to stop, come out of your cave of hurt and disappointments, turn around, and take some steps towards that well, draw some water of forgiveness, and go to that person and wash their feet. Love them. No matter how long, no matter how bitter, no matter how deep the hurt, it's never too late to restore a relationship. 20 years, my father and I were separated. But we restored that relationship, and we had a beautiful relationship. I think about what must it have been like for my dad to leave Florida and come to the hospital to seek me out. What was it like for him? What could he have been feeling? My gosh, here's my son that I love, and I haven't seen him in 20 years, and now he's almost dying, and I'm going to go talk to him? What could make him want to come and talk to me, knowing that those were the conditions, that was the experience that we had with each other? What was it that caused him to be able to do that? I came to realize that it was love, his love for me. You see, because to love, as Christ wants us to love, involves risk. It does involve risk. To love is risky. To forgive is risky. To wash another person's feet is risky. It involves risk. Because we never know how someone may react. My dad didn't know how I would react. I could have told him to just get out of my sight. I never wanted to see him again. But his love was stronger than that. And he risked all that could have been because he wanted me to know that he loved me. I never may know how someone may react, but that not knowing should never deter or keep me from loving that person. I should never say, well, I would do this, but they might do this. Doesn't matter. Christ says love, regardless of the risk. Lolly said to me, after we met, she went down and met my father. She said, you know, it would have been nice if he would have sent some of those letters. And I said, yeah, it might have been nice, but I don't know if I was ready to hear them. You see, with love too, timing was important. I don't know if I would have been ready to hear it, but God knew when I was ready. God knew when the circumstances were right, so he'd bring us together. And I was ready to listen. I was ready to open up my heart. I was ready to say, God, I'm willing to let you help me forgive my dad. The time is right, God. I'm willing to let you help me forgive because I can't do it on my own. And forgiveness is a wonderful miracle that God gives us. It's a gift that can change our hearts. It's a gift that can change our relationships with others if we will allow ourselves to love and to forgive another. If you are willing to allow your heart to be open to God's forgiveness and God's love so that you can wash another's feet, as you wash that person's feet, you will see a miracle happen. You will see a relationship restored. You will see a love renewed. That's what happened with my dad and I. Because of the miracle of forgiveness. It's never too late. Never too late to repair and to restore a relationship. And the third takeaway is that I believe with all my heart that none of us will find true fulfillment, the true joy, the true meaning that life can have for us, the true experience of life that God has planned for us until we enter into a relationship with Him. Enter into a relationship with our Heavenly Father. You see, there comes a time in all of our lives when we need to hear a Father's love. We need to hear about a Father's words. We need to feel the touch of a Father on our life. I'm imagining and hoping that everyone in here has a relationship with our Heavenly Father. But maybe there's something that's happened and your heart has closed a little bit. Maybe you think that, like I did for a while, that God's forgotten you. Maybe you feel that He's too busy, or that maybe His love for you has reached its limits, that you've finally gone over the edge and God has written you off. No one has reached that point. There is no limits to God's love. And there'll come a time when each of us need to hear the words of our Father, the words of love, the words of care, the words that will make a difference in our life. Maybe you don't know that Father. Maybe the only concept you have of Father is your earthly father, whether that was good or bad. But there's a Father in heaven who loves you. There's a Father in heaven that has pursued you. There's a Father in heaven who has thought about you day after day after day. And He's filled His chest with His thoughts of love for you. Recorded in here. Here is God's chest full of love letters to you and to me. Just as I opened up that chest and anger turns to love and hate turned to joy, I've opened up this chest so many times and He's turned my life around. There's been a miracle of love, a miracle of forgiveness that's changed my life. It's enabled me to be able to forgive. It's enabled me to be able to go and wash others' feet. This chest is filled with His words. In Jeremiah, He said that He knew you before you were even born. He knew you in the womb of your mother. Sometimes we might think that God doesn't exist. He does exist, and He knows you. You think that maybe He's forgotten you, that there was a time when you felt close to Him, but it's not that way anymore. God must have forgotten me. In Isaiah 49, He says, I have not forgotten you. I've engraven you on the palm of my hand. He said, do you think a mother can forget her child? Even though a mother may forget her child, I will never forget you. I have you, your image, engraven on the palm of my hand. And I keep that before my face every day, every moment. Sometimes you may think that God's so busy He just doesn't have any time for thinking about you, that He's forgotten you. In Psalm 139, David said that if I were to count the thoughts that you have towards me, God, they would be more than the sands of the sea. God has a treasure chest filled with wonderful, wonderful thoughts of love that can change your life, that can give you what you need at any point in your life. God is calling us to come out of our caves. He called me to come out of my cave because he said, Gary, I have a story that I want you to tell. Your story, my story. And I want you to love others. And I said, God, I don't know if I can do that. And he said, come to my well. Cleanse yourself with forgiveness, my love. And from that, you will then be able to draw the water that you need to go out and wash others' feet. He's calling us to come out of our caves just as he called Lazarus out and said, come forth. God's calling you, he's calling me to live and to love. Because there's a lot of feet out there that need to be washed. And he needs you to wash them. Mr. Weaver said that it's nice to be here because you're attentive and because you listen and because you love. I felt that love both times that I've been here. I felt that love especially tonight. I felt the attention that you were giving me as I shared something that was very special to me. Thank you for treating it with love. Thank you for listening to me. And it is my hope that forgiveness will become a part of your life, that you'll understand the miracle that God has given us. There are miracles that are still done in this world. God is still in the business of doing miracles. And he gives each of us the power to be able to do a miracle in another's life. And that miracle is to be able to forgive. To be able to forgive another. To be able to love another in Jesus' name. Thank you. I look forward to coming back again, Pastor. God bless you.